today we have a session on Lianghui, basically two sessions. This is basically a annual China's legislative meeting of NPC and CPPCC, basically National People's Congress and Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. This is when the last year's all programs are reviewed, budget is reviewed, and all the appointments are reviewed. And this is where the Prime Minister of China, the Premier of China, presents a government work report, which basically gives a policy direction and a structural roadmap of whatever is going to happen in the next 1 year or so. Now, this year's Lianghui was even more important because 14th five-year plan is ending this year, and 15th five-year plan is now being discussed, which will be starting next year. So that makes it far more based on economy and related subjects. So to discuss Lianghui, we have a very esteemed panel here. We have Professor Srikant Kondapalli from JNU, Professor G. Venkatraman from IIM Indore, Dr. M.S. Pratibha from MP IDSA, and Ms. Antara Ghoshal from ORF. So let me start with Professor G.V. Raman. Professor, as you know, right now when we discuss China, the most important thing is economy. The US-China tariff war, and as of today afternoon, I think Mr. Trump has imposed 245% tariff on China, which is practically unbelievable. I don't know what he wants to achieve. I don't know what exactly he is trying to do. So could you please go through the economic issues which were discussed in NPC and relate it with whatever is happening now, so we'll have a better idea. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. Thanks to ORF, and Atul for just asking me to come and share my views on Chinese economy. So as you mentioned just now, that the 14th five-year plan is about to get over, and the 15th five-year plan is about to start from next year. So that way, whatever happened in this year's Lianghui gives us some indication of the things to come. But more importantly, we see that this particular Lianghui also marks nearly 2.5 years since Xi, has extended his term to the third time. Now, although economics is very much in the news, but what is, very clear is politics is in command, which is driving, whatever the economic policies are. And so therefore, when the Chinese Communist Party under Xi's leadership is saying that economic security is national security. So just before the Lianghui started on February 28, the monthly Politburo meeting, Xi Jinping and his Politburo members basically deliberated on the importance of regime security. So given the external circumstances, in fact, we all now know that this Lianghui traditionally has been much to do with focusing on domestic matters, but perhaps for the first time, this Lianghui has overwhelmingly focused on whatever has been happening on the external front as well. So therefore, with 2.5 years to go in the 19th Party Congress, what happens to Xi is going to be determined a lot by economic fortunes of China. So therefore, given constraints of time, what I would like to basically focus on is on 4 points. Number one, Chinese leadership's response to infuse life in the Chinese economy, that is boosting domestic demand. Number two, re-engagement of private tech players. Number three, developing new quality productive forces, that is China's big push on the tech front. And last is obviously, China's response to the external threats. Now, it is, it has been pointed out by analysts that in this year's government work report, quote unquote, vigorously boosting domestic consumption as against striving to modernize, China's industrial system is to get a lot of priority. But actually, if you see, China continues to boost those kind of policies, initiate those kind of policies which are more addressing the supply side part of it rather than the demand side part of it. In fact, to highlight the importance of economic matters in this year's Lianghui, just before the Lianghui occurred, Xi Jinping's economic speeches were published, perhaps motivated by China's preparations for the impending trade war since Trump's elevation to White House for the second time. So, and in this whole, scheme of things, What has China done to boost domestic consumption? Analysts say, is it enough? Now, Lee has set a 2% consumer price inflation target compared to last year's 3%. Notwithstanding the absence of any fiscal stimulus, Beijing has, clearly acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, prompting to have a budget deficit of 4%. So the targets laid down by Beijing in the economic domain to that extent were very much on the expected lines. Now, given the current headwinds against China and its importance to regime security, China does not want to do anything fundamentally different from the policies it has been following. So therefore, there is more focus on continuities rather than to come up with something something which basically unsettles the whole economy. So the leadership is keen to revive the economy, yes, but as yet does not want to press panic buttons. Last year, China barely achieved the 5% growth rate owing to its exports. Will it be possible to achieve the 5% GDP growth rate target this year as well? What are some of the factors that may hinder the successful meeting of its target? And there are a number of factors, but again, for paucity of time, what I would like to focus is one of the most important, determinants when it comes to boosting domestic consumption as to how does China conduct its center-province relations given the current situation. The Due to the de-real estatization and structural change in the way China's development trajectory is now moving, which is more focused on self-reliance on high technology and China giving up on real estate motor development. So therefore, there has been a serious reconfiguration of center-province ties. In fact, what has added insult to injury as far as provinces is concerned is, on the one hand, they have been stifled of funds. On the other hand, there is growing expectations from the central leadership under Xi for provinces to do more. So Xi Jinping's focus on asking the provinces to play a leading role in China's economic growth is something which is of a great concern for the provincial leadership given the financial constraints. In fact, she's focus on asking the provinces to play a leading role was very much evident when he met with the Jiangsu delegates. And I'm going to read some of the things so you can see that this is a huge bucket list for the provincial leadership to actually fulfill. Identify key areas where it can play a leading role, pioneering integration of tech and industrial revolution, spearheading implementation of major national development strategies, serving as model of common prosperity, implement spirit of February 17th symposium on private enterprises, treat all types of ownership equally, etc., tang tang, as the Chinese would say. Now, all this is pretty difficult for the Chinese provincial leadership to address for various reasons. Number one, there is definitely a scope for greater fiscal transfers from the center to the provinces to expand local public services. Special bond quotas of 4 trillion Chinese yuan per annum to fund has been largely used in the last few years to fund capital investment. Most of it is unspent on people-related areas. In the last few years, again, the center has been drawing greater dividends from state-owned enterprises and has been using them. Most of these funds are used to further reinforce the performance of state-owned enterprises, but there is scope for increasing, drawing greater dividends and using them as fiscal subsidy for social security. Now, this year, special purpose bonds worth RMB 4.4 trillion was announced, but most of it is being used in acquiring developer land and completing land projects to restore normalcy in real estate. Now, this is definitely not very good news because, given the financial constraints that the provincial leadership is facing, they are still, delaying payments to contractors. They are not able to increase wages, etc., etc. One of them, so these are some of the factors in the center-province relations which are going to hinder China's addressal of boosting domestic consumption. Second is the concept of Neichun involution, which again is very interesting to see because as far as the domestic audience is concerned, for the first time Neichun has been officially mentioned in the government work report. But when it comes to the international audience, the Chinese leadership has been very, very vocal about how the overproduction capacities, argument is, not very much making sense, and it is working as per demand-supply equilibrium, etc., etc. But the fact of the matter is, they are very much concerned when it comes to, involution or Dechuin, because the Chinese leadership now is realizing that most of the funds that are there are not being used for R&D purposes, but competitors are simply engaging in price undercutting, and so therefore it is leading to a lot of wastage and all, which China cannot afford. So this is one. Second is re-engagement of private tech players. Analysts have labeled this differently. Some have called it rapprochement, some have called it recalibration, and some have even gone on to the extent of saying it's just merely repurposing. Now, Xi Jinping has spoken about how the private enterprises should show more chingchen, should show more spirit. In fact, February 17th symposium has been pretty much spoken about. Just before the Lianghui March 3rd, the People's Daily came out with a big article whereby it has said that how Xi Jinping has always been, given his earlier stints in various provinces, has always been supportive of provincial autonomy and provinces giving more autonomy to private enterprises. But having said that, the latest olive branch extended to the private sector comes with the caveat of what the party calls the quote unquote two unwaverings, which has been constantly referred to in the 16th, 17th, and 18th Party Congress, emphasizing that the party will unwaveringly consolidate and develop public sector of the economy and unwaveringly encourage, support, and guide the development of non-public sector of the economy. So even before the NPC sessions, as just mentioned, Xi Jinping did have a much publicized meeting in a symposium in Feb 2025, which was attended by 4 of the 7 Politburo Standing Committee, members. But then, are we in for a drastic change? Is this a serious rapprochement? Well, there are certain, there is a certain degree of skepticism for sure, and it is not very ill-founded. One, because one did not go far to the period when Beijing initiated a series of measures against private tech players that led to, tech players lying flat, the Thangping phenomenon, which we all know for sure now. Second, in 2023, the Communist Party and the cabinet developed new guidelines acknowledging that, quote unquote, the private sector is a new force to promote Chinese-style modernization, an important foundation for high-quality development, and a key force to promote China's comprehensive construction of a socialist modern power. The new guidelines hinted that the party leadership would initiate measures like protection for property rights of private firms or entrepreneurs and step to ensure fair market competition by breaking down market entry barriers. However, these announcements were not followed by any concrete measures. In fact, this year's NPC session, a spokesperson said, it would work to promote China's private economy protection law early. But however, the Lianghui has been largely silent as far as this is concerned. The third thing which I wanted to bring to your attention is how China is out there to develop tech self-reliance, and that is something which is very, very close to Xi Jinping's heart. So developing new quality productive forces, China's big push on the tech front. So emphasis on innovation and high quality development, and so therefore focus on new quality productive forces, which is called Xincher Senchan Li, which translates to breakthrough in technology, forces of production, and industrial transformation. Not only developing new quality productive forces, but also simultaneously, these new quality productive forces should not be abandoning the old ones. So new forces to empower traditional ones. And to cap it all, as Xi Jinping says, Xian Li Ho Po, which means first establish the new, then dismantle the old. Of course, the China's triumphant moment of tech nationalism manifested itself in the DeepSeek movement. The DeepSeek success has bolstered China's confidence in the AI domain, and it was expected that Chinese leadership's big push, to achieve tech self-reliance would gather a new momentum. But then we also need to understand there are certain trends which are counter to China's ability to do better on the innovation front. So, for example, China's decreased, what the growing absence of VCs in Chinese domestic market, which are betting high on the technology front. Since 2021, it has dropped 32% year-on-year basis to 30 billion US dollars in 2024. In 2024, the VC investments on tech companies, Chinese tech companies, was only one-fifth that of US companies and two-thirds of EU. Mind you, in 2020, the VC investment on Chinese tech companies was 1.5 times ahead of that of EU, and now it is two-third times less.
Professor Rahman,
Yeah.
can you wrap up in next 2 minutes?
Yeah. So second, the next concern is of disappearing unicorns. And third is contending with contradictions of state-led innovation inspired by tech nationalism and innovation. Of course, the Chinese government has announced governance-guided funds which are to invest big. We are going to see increasing role of banks, sovereign wealth funds, and SOEs. But then, to what extent this tech nationalism and innovation go hand in hand, that is something for us to see. Last, Beijing's responses to the current developments, that is the tariff wars. China has responded. China has invested a lot of diplomatic efforts in trying to come to the negotiating table. But once they were, once their responses were not responded to, it has been a tariff and counter tariff kind of a thing. So therefore, China has come up, revitalizing the Maoist slogan, "We will never yield." China has pronounced US as self-defeated bullying, double-faced. But then China is on sticky wicket, notwithstanding American troubles, because US accounts for 30% of global consumption as against China's 12%. So with withdrawal of tariffs to non-China markets, many of these, countries which are dependent on exports to US cannot afford to, antagonize United States. Second, China's need to find replacement markets itself has certain challenges, because as it reroutes its exports, it will meet with new kind of tariffs after a certain period of time, because new markets also have to protect their local players. To conclude, I would say, that, currently, as far as US-China ties are concerned, this whole tariff battle is concerned, both the sides are in what Daniel Shapiro, the famous Harvard psychologist, has called, we are seeing a tribe effect. The tribe effect is characterized by three things: adversarial mindset, both the sides adopting a self-righteousness stance, and third is, they are having a closed way of looking at things, whereby both sides, throw dirt at each other, and they don't have any time to listen to each other. So therefore, we are in for very turbulent times. And so I would conclude here, and I'll stop here by saying that these are the four factors I think are going to play a very determining role as the Chinese economy moves forward in 2025 and beyond. Thank you, Atul.
Raman, let me turn to Dr. M.S. Pratibha. We saw a very comprehensive economic analysis. So if you look at Xi Jinping and the whole Chinese Communist Party, one of the major variable that was basically giving legitimacy to CCP was economy. But that economy is not doing so well these days. And we also have a lot of this news coming up that Xi is now in a four-cornered fight where a lot of princelings and CYL and other groups are opposing him. So how is the internal political situation? How do you see, after NPC and from here, what are the issues which we need to be careful about?
So when I thank you, Dr. Atul, for giving me this opportunity to speak, and thank you, Warif. So I was when I was looking at the invitation, I was struck by the thought of what are the political priorities of the two sessions. And when I looked at the whole two meetings, as the previous speaker said, it's overwhelmingly focusing on economic security. But economic security without political purpose is meaningless. So I'll try to glean or to get a sense of what is the understanding or motivations behind, or even apprehensions behind this particular meeting. Now, generally, two sessions generally mean the annual meeting of the NPC and the CPPCC. Now, though they happen at the same time, it is a way for the communist political system to collect, organize the information and requirements from the representatives of the two sessions and convey them to the Central Committee. Now, in this regard, obtaining accurate information becomes the most important contribution. Now, we have to differentiate this from public opinion. They are not, many would confuse the two. This is not about public opinion, it is about public interest. It is supposed to be an accurate understanding of the state of affairs so that the Central Committee can make the right decision given the information available to them. So that's why the NPC is supposed to review and approve the development plan and implement the plan. And before making the decisions, they are supposed to deliberate, consult, and discuss in the CPPCC. Now, as we have seen that they have highlighted a range of economic, political, social targets and policies. But what can be gleaned from these two sessions? I would put it into two categories. The CPC, the Chinese leadership, has uh, divided into things that when in order to implement or look at the broad range economic and political policies, there are one thing which is very important. What they call it is roughly, if you a rough translation would be is that what is the real big thing of a country. Basically, what it means is what are the matters of national importance. So they say that we need to have a clear understanding about the matters of national importance or a country's most fundamental interest. Why? Because from ever since the global economic slowdown has been happening and there is a need for economic restructuring, the Chinese leadership has been emphasizing that the Chinese economy has to restructure, that the provinces or the local governments are spending on things that the Chinese society might not need. So what the Chinese leadership is saying that what are the major issues and why a clear understanding matters. Because unless you define it, it might not be possible to gather the resources to help the issues. Otherwise, precious resources would be wasted on matters of non-importance. So it is like a grand strategy to see where the national interest and the governance should be focused on. So in the two sessions, they emphasize that the party, it should be focusing on what the party cares about. Because in their view, it is after wide scale consultation and understanding of the international and domestic environment. And the party has been wise about its historic judgment. So, what are the interests of the party? That should be focused on. What are the major political and economic guidelines of the party which can be implemented? What should be maintained? So, they are again dividing this clear understanding of what are the changes which has happened ever since Xi Jinping came to power, which should be maintained, and what should be changed. So, in this, what should remain unchanged would be the political reforms which has happened so far. Now, as we are all know or familiar with, the most political concepts which should be unchanged are one is like four consciousness or awareness, which is broadly can be brought into political consciousness or overall political awareness, overall consciousness, and core consciousness. Now, why is this that? Because awareness means handling issues from the political perspective, and having an overall awareness means handling the relationship between local and central government and consciously thinking about the long term implementation so that the central government orders can be implemented smoothly. Now, why does this matter? Because whatever the central government feels that whatever guidelines have been happened, the local governments have been unable to follow the central government guidelines and actually reform and restructure the economy. So that's why they say the four consciousness has not been changed, because this is required so that the local governments can actually follow the guidelines of the central government. Now, now, why the fourth one is alignment. They have to be an alignment consciousness, because then the local government has to align their policies with the larger central government theories, policies, and decision makings, and not do something that the party explicitly prohibits. Now, what are the other concept which has been unchanged? What this is to establishes, which is Xi Jinping as a core and establishing the guiding role of Xi Jinping thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics for the new era. Now, why this is important? Because this is based on the historic process and the wisdom of the party on the evolution, historic evolution of the world order. Why this is important? Again, this is connected to, can also be connected to the broader economic reforms. The party feels that this new era represents a time when two major events are happening. One is that the world order is moving towards fourth industrial revolution, and second, there is a shift of wealth and power from the west to the east. That is, the east, the developing states are finally gaining some advance in new technologies. So two major developments are happening together. So the Chinese believe that if they can win the fourth industrial revolution, or leapfrog, or have a technological breakthrough in the fourth industrial revolution, they will be the ones to set the norms of the international order. They will be the ones to guide the international order, and in some ways reduce the west, the dependence on the west, and completely move away from western dominance in their society, in their culture, or in their economic and political structure. So this is something, is part of what they believe Chinese modernization should be like in by 2049. Now, what should be unchanged is two safeguards, because safeguard is about authority and core. To say is that to uphold Xi Jinping's position and to uphold party leadership. Basically, to uphold authority, you have to uphold Xi Jinping. In order to uphold Xi Jinping, you have to uphold the core. So it is kind of combined to say that Xi Jinping is the one who's driving, or Xi Jinping's thought should be followed. It should be unchanged. Even as we, so the reforms has to closely align with Xi Jinping's vision for the country. So what should be changed? Since the previous speaker has broadly spoken about the economic reforms, let me just bring in like what are the major ones that can be seen. So one is, we already know that Chinese economy has been facing major shock from the trade war, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the slowing global demand. So if you see the two sessions as emphasized, the previous speaker said there's not much focus on demand, but more focus on consumption. This is because the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese leadership believes that the domestic demand is a long-term objective. So if the domestic demand is a long-term objective, the short-term objective is to boost consumption. So that's why you see like you subsidies for retail sales, or many other reforms that has happened before. Now, what is a major change in approach when it comes to this economic policy? In my understanding, I would say that the Chinese leadership has caught on to the fact that sentiments drive market behavior. So if the population is concerned about its prospects, or if they feel very concerned about their livelihood, which means they're going to consume less. So in order to, if you're going to increase consumption capacity, which means improving social security, which means improving people's livelihood, childcare, healthcare, affordable housing, education, elderly. So you will see many of the economic policies are actually focusing on this livelihood. People's livelihood is closely connected to consumption. This is something that they realized ever since they started trying to restructure the economy. So in some ways, for them to boost consumption is to focus on human development, to relieve the burdens on the society so that the society can engage more in consumption. Now, again, another major theme is they've all talked about is the private enterprises. I will only add one thing where I would say that since one of the major push towards from the leadership is that the private enterprises, since it comprises more than 92% of the total enterprises in Chinese economy, they want the the provinces to support the private enterprises more. Because the competition is, sir talked about involution, because in Chinese case, when they talk about anti-involution, they talk about a circle of competition becoming much more fiercer due to limited resources. For example, the enterprises should be engaged in healthy competition, and the local government should regulate local investments so that they can create a better business environment and investment ecology. So they are urging the local governments to help and develop and support local enterprises, so that way they can engage in restructuring the economy. So this will help in structural reforms such as scientific and technological innovation and increase R&D investment. So what is the themes and concepts which can be extracted from the overall perspective is that, one, it is very clear that the Chinese plan is to industrially upgrade China and escape the middle income trap. But if you realize, in 2020, they did came up with the concept of Made in China 2025. But what they found out at that time is that the industrial upgrade or economic restructuring does not only depend on government or the engineers who are working in the enterprises, but it actually depends on the power of the social forces, which means China has to utilize the power of the internet and its ability to integrate resources. That's where they are started emphasizing more and more on AI and the internet. And China has to attract investment and as well as buy business, so that because the manufacturing is not at the advanced level that they can actually restructure. Now this way of trying to upgrade their manufacturing capability has been put on hold in some ways due to the shocks and the external external shocks and internal shocks. So that's why you see in this two sessions, there is a understanding that, one, China, as I said, has to develop new productive forces, or called as quality productive forces. One is people's livelihood matter in macroeconomic policies. Third, centralized unified leadership is necessary after the excess of unabated economic growth. Then the Chinese economy has a strong foundation, but what it lacks is coordination and organization. So they feel that the fundamentals of the Chinese economy is strong, but what they need is reorganization and coordination. So from this, I can see that they are trying to draw two lessons. One is capital allocation. One is, if the Chinese economy has to transform, then the uncontrolled expansion of capital, which has entrenched local interest, which have curtailed innovation, has to be turned into supporting private interests, private enterprises. Then, in order to define public interest, data accuracy representing what is best for the society should be given to in order to achieve parties' larger goals. Now, if you look at all these concepts, such as four consciousness or two establishes, I feel that the party comes from an understanding that local prosperity has led to local power centers and vested interest. So, where the central policies are adapted to further increase their access to wealth and power at the expense of local public interest. So, this is why these concepts are there, in order the local party secretaries can be compelled by the central party secretaries to make them more accountable. So that's one of the reasons why they have improved the supervisory roles of the central party secretaries. Okay, so because the daily lives of the Chinese people are much more influenced by local leadership. So this is one of the reasons why they believe that the Chinese officials have to be educated repeatedly through these kind of core thoughts of the leaders, as many tend to exploit central policies to serve vested interests, which might end up hurting public interest. So overall, what I would say is that while they are making large scale reforms in terms of economy and upgradation in their industrial capacity by focusing on technological and research innovation, the major push is towards actually the organization behind it, which can drive these reforms. Because if the organization, local organization or the central organization, are not in tandem with each other to drive these reforms, then these reforms might just fail. So that's why there's a lot of emphasis on how these organizations can be modernized and engaged and held accountable so that they can actually follow the central government guidelines. Thank you.
Pratibha, that was very comprehensive political analysis. Let me turn to the security and military issues to Professor Kondapalli. So, as you know, since 2014, Xi Jinping has purged almost like 78 senior military officers. In fact, since 2023, there are more than 20 senior most officers are gone. In fact, now nobody is safe. Defense minister, CMC chairman, no one is safe. And with the recent He Weitung's purge, it appears as if there is a huge internal chaos inside PLA. But on the other hand, if you look at China's Taiwan policy, it's getting aggressive and aggressive by the day. So how is this whole dynamics working? I mean, especially if you look at the NPC indications and you look at the Xi Jinping's statements, can this corruption affect their capability? How does it gel together? Like, can Mr. Xi Jinping trust his PLA to achieve whatever he wants to achieve in Taiwan? Thank you.
All. On a lighter note, I don't understand what is the consciousness establishments. If you by any chance would go to the NPC in China, you would be really dozing off in all the sessions. I mean, the kind of political language that they use in their parliamentary sessions, and I'm sure most of them would have, on some steroids or some such. I mean, you see the language that has been there in the. So when Nirmala Sitharaman goes for the budget session, you have a long, 300-400 pages stuff. And if you look at this work report submitted by Premier Li Qiang, it would be a very slim 30-40 page. And you have to actually look for where is the budget, how much is being allocated, which sector is going to get what. You actually have to look around and, break your heads to find the details. So alternative is speak about consciousness and speak about 2 establishments, 3 establishments. And I mean, this is a typical authoritarian regimes presentations. I found the CSIS item related to the budgetary allocation was very good. I thought the Chinese could have been more professional in terms of mentioning what exactly is happening in terms of the allocations. For instance, the finance minister of China would say just a one-liner that the GDP growth this year would be around 5%. And there will be another one-line sentence that the defense allocation will be 7.2%. The allocations for the next year, the coming year. So they don't mention, for instance, in 2024, what has been the actual amount disbursed, spent on defense. No mention of anything, no auditing of the procedures, no oversight of any one of those. It is the Politburo Central Committee are all replicated at the NPC level, the party state, and you have a lot of obfuscation that is in the middle. So this is actually a problematic. I spent about 30 years on the Chinese studies, and I still cannot figure out what exactly is the amount that has been spent on so-and-so sector. I mean, they did mention 5% for education, which is good. When you compare with India, we spend 2% or even less than 2%. But when you go to the details, you actually are stuck with the silence on the part of the script. So it's quite dreary. The whole process is quite dreary. And most of the time we have to break our heads to find the details on what the allocations are and how is it going. So I would suggest that we have to situate the NPC CPPCC sessions for the past, let's take about 2 to 3 years, because COVID actually resulted in virtual presentations or cascading presentations in the NPC session. So 2023 was the more concrete aspect of the 2 sessions. But before that, in 2018, the 2 sessions have cleared the presidential term has been the restriction on the presidential term for say 10 years, which was imposed by Deng Xiaoping, has been removed. And so now Xi Jinping and Han Cheng could become, lifelong presidents if they will. So this is one major, I think, outcome of the 2018 2 sessions. The second major outcome is restrictions on the private sector, which is also important for us because we are discussing how to regenerate the private business sentiments and produce to the market. I mean, you have seen that coinciding with the 2 sessions, Xi Jinping attended the private sector meeting, and Alibaba chief Jack Ma and Tencent, Meituan, and other big companies, high-tech companies were present in that. The CEOs were present in this meeting. So we can say that the restrictions imposed on the private sector is now being removed because of the tariffs, the Trump tariffs. So this is one major signaling that we come across. 2023 sessions, there was the institutional reform that began with cutting down of the bureaucracy, which is what the World Bank is asking every other country to cut down the bureaucracy and allocate resources more for the market and so on and so forth. So we see here that there is a instead of just removing the bureaucracy, what has happened is Xi Jinping started removing all those who are related to other factions rather than the general bureaucracy. The last time they actually reduced the bureaucracy was in 1998 when Chu Rongqi had a massive cut down in the, but that was basically for efficiency purposes. The current round actually is to cut down on the Communist Youth League, on various other factions within the Communist Party. So actually there is something sinister in this institutional reform. Because if you remember, there was this comprehensively deepening reforms, which was like the Department of Government Efficiency that Elon Musk is heading. So they also want to cut down the bureaucracy and remove the flab and increase the efficiency, etc. So probably Elon Musk took some inspiration from this 2023 institutional reform, because a lot of these bureaucracy has been cut down in China, but most of that was targeted to the rival factions. So much so that you don't have much support for the countering the party state structures within China. So this is one major reform program that has been initiated. The second in 2023 2 sessions was the emphasis on an anti-US posture, which is a continuation of the 20th Party Congress resolution. As you know, in 2020 October, there was the 20th Party Congress and major shift towards security rather than economy. We are talking about economy, but there was actually a major shift towards the security aspects, which, by the way, even in this session in 2025, you see a lot of mention about security aspects. So I don't think there is any major change going away from the security aspects. So that is not neglected as such. So this we need to keep in mind. For example, Xi Jinping on March 6th, 2023, so 2 years ago, he mentioned in the NPC, Western countries led by the US have contained and suppressed us in all-round way, which has brought unprecedented severe challenge to our development. These were preceding the tariffs, and of course, Biden administration has put some restrictions on the semiconductor industry and also on other high-tech products. So this is one mentioning. But the word suppressed and contained is actually not real because the containment was for the Soviet Union, not for China. And if you have $580 billion trade, and during that time, some 3,000 to 4,000 Chinese or Americans are visiting each other, that is not containment. So I think the Chinese president's comments were actually an exaggeration by saying that these are containing and suppressing. We need to be actually very critical of those when it is mentioned. Even today, it is not containment. It is just on trade-related matters. There is some debate and tariffs. It is not, Americans have not imposed any restrictions on other things other than what Biden had instituted before. So we can say that there is some exaggeration here. Last year, 2 sessions, one of the first casualties is the premier used to give a press conference, and that has been shut down. So this year, the 2 sessions didn't have the premier speaking about what are the achievements, what should be done. Li Keqiang used to give 3-4 hours of press conference. Once I attended this, he took nearly 1.5 hours to explain each one of these topics. So we don't have that kind of transparency now because the press conferences has been removed. But Wang Yi the foreign minister Wang Yi made a speech on this, which I will mention later on in relation to security aspects. So also China did not release any white paper on defense since 2019. Not that everything is mentioned in the defense white papers, but nevertheless, even relative transparency is missing in the Chinese posturing. Of course, they released a white paper on the tariffs because that was really pinching them, and so it was mentioned. So we need to keep that in mind that they haven't released a defense white paper, national security white paper, so far for the past 6 years. Every alternate year, they used to publish a white paper, but that has not been given so far. In relation to Taiwan in 2024 session, the 2 sessions, they dropped the word peaceful resolution for the Taiwan issue. Not that spectacular things have happened or China invaded Taiwan or whatever, but that is important that they have dropped this. In the current session in March, last month, there was no mention about dropping of in fact, it was a very mundane reference to Taiwan. Not much can be seen. But in 2024, they mentioned about the Taiwan-related aspects. We see, of course, the budget, defense budget, 7% last year, 7.2% this year. So there is actually an increase in the budget. Those of you who are following the budgetary aspect should remember that previously in the 90s, they were mentioning coordinated development. That is, if the civilian economy improves, they will spend more on the defense. If the civilian economy is 10% growth rate, then they will have 10% growth in the PLA budget. That was the philosophy before. Now the defense budget is more than the civilian budget. That used to be the case during the Korean War, where 40-50% of the entire GDP was allocated to the defense sector. And so we actually are going into a stage where China has not been emphasizing on the civilian economy, but more on the defense sector. I think we need to keep this in mind when we assess the defense-related matters. So there is a definitive trend because the average growth rates for the past 14 years has been, 15 years has been roughly around 5 to 6%. So defense budget is 7%, so above the civil and economic growth rates. So there is a definitive trend here, definitive signaling here that defense is more important than the civilian sector. And so I think that needs to be kept in mind in the 2024, last year, 2 sessions was important also because if you remember, in 1976, Chiang Ching, one of the Gang of Four, appropriated many of the state party functions, and there was a huge turmoil in the party, the Communist Party. Now, Xi Jinping removed the president's term, so it can be forever. They didn't mention the exact term limit. For general secretary, you don't need a term limit. It is never mentioned, so he can still remain as the general secretary. CMC, there is also no requirement. The party CMC doesn't have any specific time limit. So there is this issue. But what is important is that the party-state related differentiation was quite explicit during Deng Xiaoping's time. But today you have the party's influence on the state is very, very heavy. Let me give you an example. 36% of the working class have party committees, meaning they are party members or party. 73% of the private enterprises have a Communist Party cell, and this has increased. It began in 93, where private sector also should have party committees, but it has expanded substantially. So today it is the party's influence over the state, civil society, economy, even culture, even on other aspects, for instance, in films, in all the other. So this is a very definitive trend that began last year. And Xi Jinping was referred in the work report 34 times. That is, so the core that was mentioned by Pratibha, so there is increasing attention and focus on Xi Jinping. This year's session, Li Qiang made also comments which are related to security, not just on the PLA, but also on the... So he said in the discussions, China faces an increasingly complex and severe external environment. These are even before the tariffs began. Of course, you can argue that by January, they have 20% tariffs cumulatively from Biden administration and others, because they continue. Even Trump administration, first administration, they have some tariffs. So if you add up all this, there is a certain influence across. So Li Qiang mentions about the increasingly complex and severe external environment that may exert a greater impact on China in areas such as trade, science, and technology. So there is a lot of emphasis here on the security aspects related to the external environment. So even before the tariffs kicked in, China has already proscribed about 15 American companies on the export control policies, party list, and other. So I won't go into this because of the time factor. I want to refer to Wang Yi's statement, the foreign minister. No country should expect to suppress and contain China on one hand, while developing a good relationship with it on the other. So some music for Indian ears, because we have had the Galwan incident, and I mean, Xi Jinping also mentioned about being bullied and a lot of things. So you just see how India-China relations can be factored in those statements. He also mentioned, Wang Yi mentioned, such a two-phased approach not only undermines the stability of bilateral relations, but also fails to build mutual trust. Now, just paraphrase Galwan and post-Galwan, you can see what's the difference between US, China, and India and China. Okay, let me skip some of these and focus more on the recent. So the work report on the security on the PLA mentions establishing a framework of modern military theories with Chinese characteristics. We don't know what exactly does that mean. Modern military theories with Chinese characteristics, which means the integrated joint operations, all the jazzy things that we saw during the Gulf War, not going to be part of the Chinese characteristics, but completely different than these. So this is one aspect of the work report, because for the next 1 year, these will be implemented. So that needs to be highlighted. The second aspect that Premier Lee mentioned in terms of the PLA is the move faster to develop the network information system. Network information system. So obviously there is the IT, there is the IW, information warfare, and also in the joint operations. So this is not necessarily an American project, but also in terms of the Chinese focus on this subject. I'm tempted to say something on the economy, but since there is no time, I've given a 2-minute chit. So let me say that, but also on non-traditional security, there is the carbon peaking by 2030 and carbon neutrality by 2060, but the budget allocated is just about 3%. So I do not think the Chinese will be able to meet the targets in relation to the non-security, non-traditional security aspects. Energy intensity reduction targets are around 3%, but there is not much allocations for this. So there's a problem. On food security, because of the general food prices increase, fertilizer and fuel prices increase in the last, say, 4 years. So there is an emphasis here on the food security. So China is actually amassing a lot of these strategic reserves. And there is a focus on agriculture production and technological innovation. Speaking to the Jiangsu province delegates, Jiang Zemin mentions about the high quality development and specific focus on IT related. He called this as real economy, not the low to medium tech manufacturing, but it is the IT related, tech based. To lift the current economic woes, we need to focus on this. So there is a lot of emphasis here on, and so the DeepSeek, AI, 5G, big data, there is some $138 billion of allocations, funding for these projects. A National Venture Capital Guidance Fund was established, and this is related to the digital economy. On unemployment, there is again some fudging of the figures. Previously, 3 years ago, the Premier mentioned 41% urban unemployment. 41% urban unemployment. And this year, they mentioned about 17% unemployment. How did they get these figures? They removed students from the category of unemployment. If you're a student and if you have gone to the employment exchange, your name is cut off in the category of unemployment. So 17%. Last year it was 23%, but this year it was made into 17%. So there's a lot of tweaking of these figures that we need to keep in mind. Finally, on security, since Atul prodded me to say on this, most of the dismissals were at the staff appointments, but it would disturb the command control structure. If you're an ordinary soldier, ordinary officer, meaning in the PLA, you have to follow the orders. You have to get the command controls streamlined. But if you do not know who is going to be your next leader, it is simply not possible for the command control structures to function efficiently. So from that point of view, there is a problem with the anti-corruption drive. That there will be a problem in terms of combat. If you take the Taiwan scenario, South China Sea, or even India-China scenarios, because there is no de-escalation on India-China, so we should expect something on the India-China borders as well in the near future. So this means that actually there is a problem in terms of the, please bear with me, those who are from the military background in this room. If you have no clear command control structures, it is actually problematic in the C4SR related matters. So there is actually a problem on this front, but it is mostly staff related. So China still can, the PLA still can function in a Taiwan invasion scenario with the kind of removal of the people from the PLA. So I will stop here, but I am also, again, tempted to say something on the aging of the society. This is one of the most focal areas of this work report, and they're worried about the aging of the society. The average age of Indians is 27 years, most of those who are in the back benches. The average age of the Chinese is 38 to 39 years. And this is catching up. So what is the solution? The solution is China says we let the marriage age be reduced from 20 years to 18 years. So the Communist Party is telling you to marry at 18 years. And it also says how many babies you produce. So we are actually very fortunate to have been born in India. We can choose our lives. And this is a big issue in China today. Thank you.
All your insights. Let me move to final author, Antara. Antara, please give me an overview of how we see from outside at the whole NPC, please. And please be brief because we don't have much time.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me for this important discussion. It is indeed an honor to be a part of this distinguished panel. It has been a great discussion so far, and I learned so much from all my co-panelists. Being the last speaker, the challenge remains that much of the ground has already been covered. So what I would like to add to the conversation is how the two sessions got covered in the Chinese media, how China's state media, Chinese strategic community interpreted the deliberations at the two sessions, and how they defined national priorities and where the concerns lie. So I would like to briefly highlight on these issues. There might be some repetitions. Kindly bear with me on that. So I agree with most of my co-panelists that this year's session, two-session, was very important, not only because it marks the final year of China's 14th five-year plan and laid the foundation for China's upcoming 15th five-year plan, but also because the timing of the gathering, the timing was really very critical. It happened at a time when the Chinese economy is facing multiple challenges. From an external perspective, the weakening global economic momentum, the intensifying China-US great power rivalry, the increase in tariffs, all these have brought unprecedented pressure on China's export companies, which are actually the lifelines of Chinese economy. On the other hand, from the domestic perspective, my co-panelists also highlighted this, the slow pace of economic recovery of the Chinese economy, insufficient domestic demand, sluggish consumption, industry involution, all have constrained China's growth prospect to a great extent. So no wonder the discussion on the economy was at the core of this year's two sessions. In terms of economic policy, the focus was on stabilizing growth, Second, expanding domestic demand consumption so as to hedge against the global economic downturn and geopolitical risks. Third, protecting the private economy, that is, the small and medium sized enterprises who are at the forefront of Trump's tariff onslaught, and thereby protecting employment and social stability. The growth target again was at 5%. The fiscal deficit ratio was raised to 4% in conjunction with the ultra long term special government bonds and local government special bonds aimed at driving consumption growth. Various consumption stimulus measures were introduced, like the Old for New program or new subsidies introduced for mobile phones, tablets, smartwatches. Special government bonds were introduced to support automobile, home appliances, and home decoration consumption. Local governments were encouraged to expand the scope of cultural tourism, silver economy, and other fields of consumption. Um, Importance was also given to improving the quality of service consumption by focusing on areas like education, housing, medical care, and elderly care. Strengthening innovation and technological empowerment was yet another area of key focus. The push was on major breakthroughs in areas like integrated circuits, AI, life sciences, health, energy, environment, all aimed at improving China's total factor productivity and accelerating industrial upgradation in Chinese private enterprises. There was also continued focus on artificial intelligence plus fields, and there was also much support for applications such as smart driving and 6G equipments. The third key agenda this year was stabilizing the property and stock markets through a policy combination of interest rate cuts, loan increases, tax cuts, and so on and so forth. In the military domain, the increase in defense budget was at 7.2%, and the Chinese media pegs the figure at 1.81 trillion yuan in spending. The increased defense spending was aimed at achieving technological breakthrough in new areas such as hypersonic weapons, aircraft carrier technology, electromagnetic guns, and so on and so forth. Actual combat deployment was also given high priority, along with joint exercises in multiple war zones to enhance long distance coordinated combat capabilities, and also international joint exercises was mentioned in the report as well. Um, Finally, in terms of trade policy, the focus was on stabilizing foreign trade through tax incentives and financial facilitation, and attracting foreign investment through relaxation of market access and institutional opening up. The other issues that attracted public attention was the renewed focus on deepening industrial chain cooperation under the Belt and Road Initiative, so as to reduce China's dependence on the US market, as well as to hedge against the risks within Chinese domestic market. And finally, fast tracking China's participation in multilateral forums like Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans Pacific Partnership, that is CPTPP, and Digital Economy Partnership Agreement, DEPA, which was also widely discussed and debated. Although there seemed to be much public support for these policy proposals, there were also concerns regarding the implementation challenges. Among the challenges, first is the geopolitical risk. Many Chinese observers noted that the Sino US trade war and the technological blockade put by the US has posed the single biggest challenge to China's foreign trade and industrial chain security, making it absolutely critical for China to stimulate domestic demand. However, domestic demand is it is the weak point of Chinese economy, and it is easier said than done to stimulate domestic consumption. From that perspective, many Chinese observers believe that the current policy proposals may not be sufficient to completely readjust the Chinese economy from being export oriented to being domestic demand led. Furthermore, there were concerns that in the domestic economy, if vigilance is not maintained, the expansion of the scale of ultra long-term special government bonds and other special bonds may lead to corruption and inefficient investment. On the other hand, China's focus on BRI and CPTPP also generated mixed response from people. Many feared that aligning with the high standard rules such as CPTPP and DEPA will require further stringent domestic reforms, which may lead to more pain for Chinese domestic industries. Overall, since the beginning of Trump 2.0, the mood in China is that of pessimism. And the domestic public sentiment in Beijing is that the era of rapid progress and overnight wealth might be over. And there is an era of chaos that has begun, and it is expected to last for at least for the foreseeable decade. So that's pretty much how I would like to sum up the discourse in Beijing after post the two sessions. I'll stop here and maybe I can take up some questions in the question answer session. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Antara. That was brief and pretty good. Okay. So we have only 15 minutes left, so I'll open the floor for questions. Please be brief. Introduce yourself and please be brief. We don't have much time. Please, Kalpit.
To congratulate all the panelists for a very brilliant presentation. So my question is related to, you spoke about semantics, particularly the semantics of the Communist Party and how convoluted they could be, and that they could be, there could be different meanings to that. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to the February study group meeting that had happened in China at the Politburo. It spoke about the fact that China needed to safeguard its national political security and regime security. So, how would you see these two dynamics in terms of the Trump tariffs and the Trump onslaught? So,
Greetings, everyone. I'm Deepak Kumar Sharma, a student at Delhi University. So, my question is to Professor Shrikant. So, in the wake of Trump tariffs, President Xi's recent Southeast Asia tour has been seen with much rather speculations as an effort to strengthen the regional ties, considering the RCP, that is the world's largest free trade agreement. Do you think that the Trump tariff have given the China's influence in Southeast Asia a much needed boost, and the further nations are going to join the RCP? Does the Chinese state think that the RCP and other free trade agreements are as a way to tackling the Trump tariffs? And my second question is to Professor Venkatraman. So Chinese are known to be masters of the special economic zone concept. This is the way they have developed, and further they have announced major projects such as the Tianfu New Area and the Chengdu Chongqing economic zone as well. So how do you see the new tariff wall will affect the special economic zones of the Chinese economy? Thanks.
Namaskar sabhi ko. This is Ekta Sharma and I'm pursuing my bachelor's in international relation politics in Amity, Noida. My question is to Shrikant sir. Sir, we have seen that China has a history of land grabbing and claiming Indian territories illegally, including territory of Ladakh, and we have seen that around 38,000 square kilometers of Indian territory in Union territory of Ladakh for last 6 decades. When can we expect China to return it, and what's China's real motive behind such actions? And sir, also when India and China going to be friends again, and when are we going to hear this Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai slogan again? Thank you.
Is there anybody in the world who wants to go and remove the Communist Party of China, and political security is that, right? Anybody who wants to invade China, do you think anybody can invade China? It's the second largest economy, third largest military force in the world. Can we imagine somebody going and invading China and removing the Communist Party? I mean, this is a crazy suggestion. Dai Pingko, when he was the state councillor in 2006, he mentioned in the US-China economic, strategic and economic dialogue, he mentioned 4 things. One is the political independence of China, meaning state security, party security. That's the primary, number one, core interest. Number 2, he mentioned about the territorial integrity and sovereignty. So Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang, all that stuff will come in this. Then he mentioned about ideology. So basically Communist Party ideology. Then he mentioned autonomy, strategic autonomy. So a lot of things were added later on. 2008, they added the South China Sea. They added Senkaku Islands. And 2009, they added South China Sea for the core interest. And then it kept on expanding all the while. So we see that there is some discussion within China on the core interests and political security, national security, etc. Of course, today we are in the midst of these tariffs, and it's a very animated situation in China and other places, because everybody is now in the tariffs, although we got some 90-day reprieve, but this is only temporary for us in the sense that this will be, you never know tomorrow what President Trump will decide. So this is, so from the Politburo perspective, I think they were trying to keep the flock together. Instead of saying political security, national security, it is the Communist Party with Xi Jinping as the core. That is the security that they want to. And I think this is crucial for us to understand. It is not about China getting disintegrated, Communist Party getting disintegrated, or there is some problem. You can't expect a $19 trillion GDP economy going down the drain anytime soon. I mean, there is no way you can see this happening, right? They have a lot of depth, manufacturing, services, so on and so forth. Somebody mentioned domestic consumption. China has 53% domestic consumption. India has 63% domestic consumption. So that is, if there are 100 items available, we consume 63 items. China consumes 53 items. Americans consume 69%. So quite a big consumption. That's why everyone wants to sell, and that's why Trump is insisting on these tariffs. So we actually see, because the key weakness of China is exports. It's an export-driven economy. So national security will involve also the export-oriented economy. This is now come to a standstill right now because of the, of course, it is not completely come to a standstill because last year China exported $3.4 trillion worth of goods, out of which 1.7 trillion is for the global South countries, Latin America, Africa, Asia. So just about nearly, say, 1.6, 1.7 trillion is towards Europe, US, Japan. ASEAN, of course, is $980 billion. Quite a big jump in their trade with ASEAN countries. Somebody mentioned ASEAN, nearly $1 trillion of trade with the ASEAN countries. So that is important. So where do we figure out this national security problem? There is no national security problem for China. It is Xi Jinping's security, it is regime security that is the problem here. I don't think China is going down the drain, neither economy nor the political structure, anywhere down the line, 10, 15, 20 years. I don't see that is happening. So, so this is quite strange. Xi Jinping in ASEAN, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia this week. So in the light of the tariffs and RCEP, that's the question, right? In terms of the tariffs, Goldman Sachs assessment is that 80% of China's exports to the US will fall this year. 80%. That's about $580 billion of trade will be almost, it will take 1 or 2 years, but this is the fall they expect. Because of this, 20 million jobless in China. And they said 10 to 20 million jobless. And roughly about 0.6% to nearly 1% GDP decline. There is an estimate by the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences that for every 1% decline in GDP, there are 8 million jobless. So we should expect a minimum 10 to 20 million jobless this year in China because of this turbulence of tariff. So, of course, that is a security issue. Because all these guys who have no employment are going to do the dharna outside, right? They're going to join the countless people in the protests, strikes, different forms of, so that's the security, national security issue that they're going to face in terms of the GDP growth rate and lack of it. So tariffs will have a major impact unless until they come together, discuss issues, sort out. As we are all doing, 90 countries, as Trump said, are going to discuss the tariff-related matters. So I think clubbed up with the RCEP and tariffs, that's the position. On Ladakh, when are we going to solve and when are we going to be having Hindi Chini Bhai Bhai? Not in my lifetime. I hope not also in your. You may, since you have a longer time, probably that will realize. Under what circumstances? I think Dr. Jaishankar clearly mentioned, unless until peace and tranquility prevails on the border, we will not have any bilateral relations. So it is a clear signaling from the minister. So I guess the bottom line is mentioned.
Yeah. New tariff walls and impact on SEZs. I think it depends on, what are the kind of clusters related to a certain kind of business in a certain special economic zone. So for example, if you look at tariffs and its impacts on textile industry, garments, handbags and all, till now, the American market was the main market. And most of the buyers who were American buyers used to pay upfront 50% of what their orders. But now with this tariff, suddenly that is gone. And, where will these textiles go, handbags go, etc.? That's a huge problem. And given the very limited appetite as far as domestic consumption is concerned, and given that Chinese understand this problem and they are also more hell-bent on saving, they are very savvy in negotiating prices. So therefore, garment industry is going to be, it's already hit and is going to be very, very severely hit. Now, if you look at manufacturing equipment, say, for example, utensils that are more supposed to cater to restaurant business and all that. Now, given China's, prowess in steel capacity and all that, so even after, these tariffs, because of cheap steel that is available and because tariffs are imposed on manufacturing costs, the cost of manufacturing of certain equipment like those which are used in restaurant business and other utensils, it's not very much. And given the other players are pretty expensive, this part of the business is not going to suffer much. Number three, if you're looking at low altitude economy, for example, which China is going very huge on, and the government work report also mentioned about it, companies like Xpeng and all are coming up and giving big competition to Elon Musk business also. So Airbus helicopter has, set up its first major regional center in Guangdong province in a place called Hangqin. So tariffs, does not have much of an effect as far as this particular center is as far as low altitude economy related business is concerned. So therefore, when we are examining, impact of tariffs on on various SEZs, it depends on what kind of business, what kind of clusters, one is talking about. the overall scheme of things.
Just like to add that I agree that many of the concepts are very sleep inducing, but nevertheless, it represents something. I mean, I'm like I look at China and I say, okay, it's not that they developed two cities, Shanghai and Beijing, and sat back, or four cities. They developed every city, every province, every county, and after Xi Jinping came, added $1 trillion every year to their economy. So there must be something there. And they had elite cohesion, except for Cultural Revolution. During the Cultural Revolution time and 2018, when there was a presidential, when they took off the presidential limit, except these two times, largely they had elite cohesion. So my understanding is that what is the thing which provides, what is the basis which provides that? And uh, at that level, there are these concepts that they have brought. I mean, it is our duty to figure out what these concepts means, though as boring as it might be. But in my understanding, these concepts tell you even about the current situation. When they tell you that, okay, we need to have more alignment, it tells you that the local government and the central government are not in alignment. That tells you the problem, that they have problem implementing their economic restructuring, which has been, Xi Jinping was supposed to do it in his first term. So it has not, it has been, it's been slow in their implementation. It also tells you that despite these problems, some restructuring has happened, that their domestic consumption has risen to some extent. It also tells you that when they say there should be more coordination and organization, you could see that, or more supervision. You would say that there's more bureaucratic control. It says that during the first Deng Xiaoping time, there was less bureaucratic control, which led to the provinces determining their own economic policy, which also might have led to prosperity, but it also led to overcapacity. So there is a rein-in or supervisory role with the parties bringing back to say that, yes, what you have done has led to prosperity, but is also now leading to overcapacity because it has led to entrenched interest, local power centers, and the guidelines are not being followed. So the supervisory role which they are envisioning also tells you more control over trying to put more control over the local policies. And when they say that we don't have accurate data, we need more accurate data, it also tells you that how compared to what we think of control, and you can see that vast areas are not under their control because of information dissemination on social media, on internet. So how do they know what is happening, what represents their interest? Because at the end of the day, as we said, economic interest is the contract that they have given to their society. So when, again, a jargon, when they say new era, when they talk about new era, they're not just talking about, oh, it's just Xi Jinping. They are saying we are going to guarantee that China will be a developed country, and the leadership would provide it. So it is a guarantee to the society to say that they will develop China into a fully developed society by 2049. From what I have seen, from they have been able to achieve, I'll be more cautious in dismissing that whether they cannot, or I'll be more cautious in observing in what way they would be trying to achieve it, and what are the stumbling blocks, or what are the things. And I would say the biggest stumbling block as of now, from what their apprehensions are, is the US external shocks. That it has, as I said, the COVID recovery, and now the tariffs have become an extremely sensitive issue. And this is going to be a big stumbling block in all these policies are being implemented. So I think that we need to have a more careful look at what China is doing and how China is responding to these changes, and how they are trying to implement, or what would happen in the future. Maybe that would give us also an understanding of how to prepare ourselves in this very uncertain and very transformational international order. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratibha. With those final words, let me conclude the session. We are already 5 minutes ahead. So we'll continue the discussion in the refreshment. Please join us in the refreshment room.